You're listening to the Extraordinary Everyday Podcast with Wendy Johnson, episode number 71.
Welcome to the Extraordinary Everyday Podcast, where women come to be inspired and motivated to become the best version of themselves and elevate the quality of their everyday. Now, here's your host, certified life coach, Wendy Johnson.
Hello, beautiful friends. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we're diving into a topic that I believe holds kind of a secret power. The power of saying no. Let's be honest, many of us find it hard to say no, right? It's so easy to get caught up in pleasing others or feeling like we should do something because it's expected. So today, we're going to explore how saying no can be a positive, empowering choice. We'll look at when and how to say no effectively, plus the emotional and practical benefits of doing so. Let's get started. First things first, let's talk about why saying no matters. At its core, saying no is about setting boundaries. Boundaries protect what's most important to us: our values, our time, our energy. But here's the challenge. Society often pushes us to say yes. Yes to invitations, yes to requests, yes to being constantly available. We're so used to saying yes that when we do say no, we can feel guilty or even selfish. Sound familiar? Well, here's the truth. Saying no is actually a way of honoring yourself. When you say no to things that don't align with your priorities or that stretch you too thin, you're creating room for what truly matters in your life. It's a powerful way to prevent burnout and reclaim a sense of calm and control. Here's a quick story to illustrate why this is so powerful. I once had a friend named Sarah who loved helping others. She was always saying yes to volunteering, extra work projects, family requests, you name it. But eventually, Sarah started to feel exhausted and resentful. She told me, I feel like I'm giving so much to everyone else that there's nothing left for me. It wasn't until she learned to set some boundaries that things truly started to change. She began saying no to commitments that didn't truly matter to her, and she found a new sense of peace and fulfillment. This story reminds us that saying no isn't selfish. It's a way of making sure that we are okay so that we can keep showing up fully for the things that matter most. How do we know when to say no? This part is all about listening to our inner signals. Here's a question. Have you ever said yes to something and then instantly regretted it? One way to figure out when it's time to say no is by tuning into your emotions. If you're feeling dread, resentment, or frustration at the thought of doing something, that's usually a sign that a boundary is being crossed. Another clue, look at your priorities. We all have things that matter deeply to us: our family, our work, our health, our personal projects. If a request doesn't align with these priorities, then it might be time to say no. It's not about rejecting someone else. It's about honoring what's important to you. In episode 65, The Power of Priorities, Aligning with What Matters, we discover what our priorities are in our life. And finally, consider your capacity. We all have limits to our energy and time. Respecting those limits isn't selfish, it's self-preserving. Remember, you don't need a valid reason to say no beyond simply knowing it's too much for you right now. Let me share an example that might feel familiar. Imagine a friend asks you to help them move on the weekend. You've already had a packed week and all you want is some downtime. But you find yourself saying yes, and by Saturday, you're exhausted and feeling resentful. This resentment is often a big clue that a boundary was crossed. Or here's another one. Have you ever said yes to an extra project at work or in your community, even though your plate was already full? You might have thought, I'll just make it work. But instead, you end up feeling overwhelmed and stressed out with little time for other things that matter to you. These situations show us that feelings of resentment, frustration, or dread can be signs that it's time to say no. By respecting our own time and capacity, we're actually protecting our well-being. Now let's get into the how. How can we say no without feeling awkward or overly apologetic? Let's say your coworker asks you to join a committee. You already have a full workload, but you feel the pressure to say yes. Instead of automatically agreeing, you might say something like, I really appreciate the invite, but my schedule is already stretched pretty thin, and I want to make sure I'm giving my best to my current responsibilities. This is something that you can write down because it will take practice. Another example, I had a friend named Mary who used to struggle with saying no to social invitations. She was worried people would think she didn't care about them. But she started saying, I'd love to see you, but tonight I need some time for myself to recharge. And guess what? People respected that. Sometimes saying no just needs a little honesty and kindness. Remember, a simple, honest response often works best. And of course, you may face pushback. You can repeat your no calmly. A polite, I'm really not able to, can do wonders. So what's the upside of saying no? I'll start with the emotional benefits. When we say no to things that drain us, we create emotional freedom. It's like letting out a breath you didn't even realize you were holding. You feel lighter, less stressed, and more in control. I remember a time when I had taken on too many projects. I felt drained and even a bit resentful. But when I finally started saying no to a few things, it was like a weight was lifted. I suddenly had time for things that brought me joy, like spending time with my family and diving into creative projects. That emotional relief and reclaiming of my time were incredibly empowering. Saying no also frees up time and energy for what truly matters. Instead of spreading ourselves thin, we can focus on the quality of our experiences and relationships. Each no opens up a space for a meaningful yes somewhere else in our lives. All right, as we wrap up, here are a few tips to make saying no a little easier. Start small. Begin with smaller no's to build confidence. You might start by saying no to a minor request, like a last-minute coffee date or an extra work task that doesn't align with your goals. The second tip is set personal policies. This can be a game changer. If you've decided, for example, not to take on new projects after a certain hour, it becomes much easier to say no when the time comes. You're simply following a rule you've set for yourself. For me, 6 p.m. is the deadline. I don't answer emails or take phone calls. That's my time for dinner and for relaxation with my partner. What will you do to set personal policies for yourself? And finally, celebrate your wins. Each time you honor a boundary and say no, give yourself a little internal high five or a pat on the back. You're making choices that support your well-being, and that's something worth celebrating. To wrap up, I want you to remember that saying no isn't about rejecting people. It's about choosing you. It's about making sure you have the energy, the space, and the peace of mind to focus on things that light you up. Also, to focus on the people who fill your life with meaning and the priorities that align with who you truly are. So next time you're faced with a request that doesn't feel right, take a deep breath and consider saying no. Not because you don't care, but because you care deeply about where you're investing your precious time and energy. Thank you so much for listening today, friends. And remember, setting boundaries isn't just self-care. It's essential to living a balanced, fulfilling life. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need a little encouragement to embrace the art of saying no. Until next time, take care and keep protecting your extraordinary every day. I look forward to being with you next week. Take care and bye for now. Hey, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, you have to come check out More You, my community of like-minded women. We show up to create the highest version of ourselves and elevate the quality of our everyday along the way. Head over to ontraclifecoaching.com/join. That's ontraclifecoaching.com/join. I'd love to see you in there. And if you haven't grabbed your copy of the Mindset Makeover, head over to ontraclifecoaching.com/makeover and get a copy that teaches and inspires you to show up as your most extraordinary self.